Hi, welcome to the Evolving Outlier podcast. This podcast is dedicated to those who feel they sit just outside of the in group, who enjoy the journey of discovery and change, and who want to live free from the tyranny of man-made religious rules and are excited about life and the journey. Today, I thought I'd give you an intro to why a podcast, because there's a million of them out there, why another one, and a little bit of insight into who I am. And so I invited my friend Adrienne Melvin, who knows me well, but is a great host, to come and just ask me some questions so you can get an idea of why you're listening to this podcast today. Thanks. Fire
Good
away.
morning.
You and this good morning.
Good evening. Good whatever.
Whatever you're watching
however
this.
you're listening. I'm so excited to be here.
So am I. I'm
Thank you for
nervous,
inviting
though.
me.
Yeah, you're the right one. Now you make me feel comfortable, so it's good.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I heard Evolving Outlier. We're just going to jump right in.
All right, go
Okay,
for
let's
it.
jump. So I heard Evolving Outlier, and my brain just was like, all my wheels were turning. Like that settings app, my brain was going like doing this. And I need to know more just about the name. Like, say more about Evolving Outlier. Like, what does that really mean?
Yeah. So I was talking to a friend, and we were just talking about the journey of life and where we both were. And I happened to mention that I always feel like I'm an outlier, just outside whatever is supposed to be in, and I'm not even sure what that is because in evolves. But I've always been on the outskirts, from being a girl playing sports growing up, from being a female preacher in a world that somebody said women can't preach and they can't pastor, to being the only black woman at the Walt Disney Company on the Tokyo portfolio, right? Things like that. And so I've always felt like I was just outside of whatever's considered to be in, but I always felt like even in those spaces, I was always evolving and moving to a place of some version of success. And so I said, very casually, I said, I just feel like I'm an evolving outlier. And I said, I think there's a lot of people like me who find themselves in a successful place, measured success by their own definition, not the world's, who feel like they've just evolved and they've arrived at a space in spite of. And whether it's putting aside the religious pressures on them, or putting aside what the industry says or what their parents said or whoever they are, because they don't have a home, an address, they don't have a gender, it's just they. They've moved and evolved in spite of. And so I said, I should do something with that. Here we are.
And when I hear we're doing something, but when I hear Evolving Outlier, what I really hear, part of me here is like social constructs or societal,
breaking them down,
deconstructing what they, and really we, because we've subscribed to it.
Listen, we take it in and we subscribe to it and we buy all the issues.
And we buy all the issues that they're selling.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when did you realize, I heard you say like when I was younger and I was playing sports and I was the only girl. When did it like click, like, oh, I'm not doing what they're doing. I'm outside. I'm over here and they're over there. This is the normal box and I don't want to play in there.
It was today when?
Today years old.
No, I'm, in my 50s, to be honest. It took a long time, and really probably my daughters.
Oh, wow.
And watching them evolve and watching them in their relationships, and coming to the conclusion that really being different is okay. Carving your own path is okay. And then I turned around and I looked behind me and realized I've always been a pioneer.
You've always done that, yeah.
Right? But you don't realize it when you're in the moment. You're just doing what you do.
Yeah.
And then kind of like when you turn around and look at a tractor behind you and you see it's just been turning up stuff. You're looking this way, but behind you, you've just been turning up ground and creating paths for other people. And that's been really powerful for me to look back and see the lives that have been impacted, the things that have been built, the legacy that's been established in the earth. And we don't talk about that because it sounds self-serving.
Right.
It sounds arrogant. It sounds egotistical. But if most of us would write down the resume of people that we've impacted and the things that we've done, many of us would be surprised.
You would be surprised.
Yeah, you'd be surprised.
I have so many things to say because
Go for it.
this is so interesting. So before we even talk, like I want to talk about the podcast, but I really want to give space and context for why a conversation about evolving outliers is so important right now. And I think part of it is, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to let you do all the solutions. I feel like I can see how subscribing to these things has caused harm. And I'm just going to go ahead and say more harm to some people groups than others.
Yes.
I would say it's done a lot of damage to women,
Yes.
done a lot of damage to any person of color.
Yes.
And so what do you have to say about the damage that has been caused and moving on from that damage?
Yeah, so part of why I wanted to do the podcast is because I believe that I have guests who be on the show who have traversed through a myriad of issues and situations that really could have very easily caused them to quit and throw in the towel and be like, this is not worth it. And yet they kept going. They kept evolving in spite of. And so you're right, people of color, women, I'm going to get in trouble for this, people in the community, right? Marginalized, disenfranchised groups who always have an uphill battle
Right.
and an uphill journey to get to some version of success. I think a podcast today is important because the guests will then speak to their journey.
Right.
And perhaps even if it just impacts one person and makes them feel like the struggle and the push is worth it, to be fully materialized as their real selves,
Right.
I think it would be all worth it. Because I know for me, just watching the various women in my life and watching them just press in spite of inspired me to go, oh man, I don't have it quite that bad. You know what I mean? And so I just, it inspires me to keep going. So my goal is to inspire, to encourage, to push somebody out there who's going, man, I don't know, to go, actually, in spite of all this, I'm still moving forward.
I'm still moving forward.
I'm still moving forward.
And when you mentioned your girls,
Yeah.
who I love.
They're beautiful. I just want to say that. They're amazing.
I just need to say that out loud. Shout out to the girls. It's crazy how you have viewed yourself as an outlier. And in some ways, you would probably say, I don't want to speak for you, that has had a negative effect on you.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
But they watched you, their outlier mother, and then change the narrative. And they live in their fully realized, I'm different. And that's what it is, self. And it's so crazy how part of the lie of being an outlier is that it's not working for you.
Right.
And that, but it's just interesting because I feel like that generation, the stuff that we view as, I wish I were different. Maybe we don't say that today, but back then, all of the times that you wish you were different, and then this new generation, and they don't feel that way.
Like, I'm different.
Yeah, they don't feel that way.
Embrace it. Take it. Yeah.
And they actually look at sameness as like, what?
Problematic. Yeah. And yet there are still some who haven't caught on yet, right? Who are still wishing for something different, or wishing for a different family, or wishing for a different set of circumstances, wishing for a different friendship circle, right? And I've struggled just because I've always felt different. I met a friend, saw a friend recently I hadn't seen in 30 years.
Wow.
And it made me remember elementary school, right? And I was telling somebody recently, I said, I can still remember the friend groups by name.
Wow.
They're the ones that go out to lunch. We called them bougie back then because in 8th grade they went to lunch down at Jack London Square.
Oh my God.
Right. But I was so envious that they could do that back then. And then there was the friendship group, and they hung out and they did sleepovers, and they were really pretty, and they all hung out, right? And I can remember very distinctly at a very young age, like 6th, 7th grade, the groups that I felt like I was not a part of because I felt like I was different, right? Either not pretty enough, not athletic enough, or we had money for the wrong reasons. I won't get into that. I'll leave my dad's business out of this. Okay. But not having money that was respectable, right? So I can't really hang out with the rich kids either, even though we had money, right? And I had all the stuff,
right?
But just that space of, and I really believe this with all my heart, most people have that small insecurity on the
Everybody
inside
has
of
that.
them
Absolutely.
that feels like I'm just outside of
Something.
that.
Yes.
And everybody's that may be different,
Yes.
but we feel like we're
But
outside
we all have
of it.
that.
And so, and I told you this before, you know, I've done a lot of things, been a lot of places, been all over the world, and I still meet people who I think are at the pinnacle of incredible success. People that we would look up to, people that we think are doing amazing, and you talk to them, and you hear that little line
You hear
of
that
insecurity.
yeah, you hear that outlier voice.
You hear it, and you think to yourself, they feel that way too. And the thing is, we don't talk about it.
Right.
We get on social media and we filter and we give the best version.
Yeah,
we
every
take
time.
100 pictures to get that one,
One.
and then we filter that one.
With that one.
Right? And we present this thing to the world
Right.
as if it's all good. And then we sit at home and in the quietness and the stillness of our own homes in isolation, we pick
somebody
ourselves
different.
apart. We wish we were this. We wish we were that. We wish we weren't rejected by that group. We wish we were accepted by that group. And so I just want to really speak to the people who are willing to acknowledge that voice on the inside that feels like they're not enough, that feels like, I want to be my authentic self, but I'm not sure I'm going to be accepted, and are willing to say, but it's worth the risk because God created one of me. Intentionally, one of me, and he intended for me to be the fullness of what that is.
Of what that is.
And so that's my heartbeat.
Okay, I'm gonna
Do your
I
thing.
hear like my brain just separated two groups of people.
Okay.
So the group of people who are in,
Yes.
right? Like wherever
Whatever
they're
it is,
in,
yeah.
wherever they're in at, not good English, wherever they're in at, there's the in group of people, which is a very distinct group. Like if we think about high school and those types of spaces, that's a distinct group of people. And then there's another group of people who are not in that thing.
Yes.
But both groups are experiencing that outlier voice.
Absolutely.
So then my question is the message for both of those groups of people, or is there two different messages? Because technically you're, by all societal norms, you are in. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I
Like,
do.
and how do you delineate between the people who you are clearly out, you not fitting in none of this stuff, and I'm in all the things, and I still am not something.
But isn't that called humanity?
Yeah.
Isn't that for those who are Christians, this will make sense to you. There's a space that's empty on the inside.
Correct.
That I think God left intentionally. One, to be filled by him, right? And yet we fill it with all these other things, right? Hoping to be accepted,
Right.
hoping to appear as if we have it all together. And whether you've managed to master
Right.
the image of I have it all together, or whether you're still struggling with it, both parties, both groups still have that same voice
The same voice.
of,
Yeah.
of more, emptiness, right? Not fitting in, all the things. It's there in both groups. And so what it requires, and what I'm finding even for my own self at this age, is a level of honesty and a level of transparency with my own self,
Right.
right? As opposed to spending so much time trying to make sure I appear as if I have
Some
it
type
together,
of way. Right.
whatever that means.
Whatever that means.
Because you can end up playing Twister, right? All over the place.
Trying to be together.
Trying to be together,
Right.
because everybody's got a different opinion about what together is, right? And so I've just begun to just kind of slow it down just a little bit and say, okay, why are you doing this? And who are you trying to
Who is
please?
this for? Yes.
Because at the end of the day, on your best day, with your best clothes, your best weave, your best makeup, your face beat, all the weight loss, somebody gonna have a problem
Yeah, correct.
and think that you should have done this, that, and the
Yep.
other. The
Yep.
image police are still going to exist.
And defund them.
Nice. That was good. Listen, who
Yes.
all have their own issues.
Right,
Because
right.
if we take the metaphor and we put it into real life, those very same people that don the uniform got a life and issues too,
Everybody.
even though they step into that role, right? Pastors, we have lives too, right? Even if we step into the role, we still have family, we still have kids, we still have all the idiosyncrasies and internal dysfunction,
Yep.
if I can say it that way, as everybody else. But we have a calling and a mantle that we carry, that we
Yeah.
have to carry out while we deal with all the rest of the stuff.
Yeah.
And it's crazy.
And since you opened the church doors,
Open the church
let's
doors.
go
The
on.
doors of the church are
The
now
doors
open.
of the church are now open,
Yeah.
and I shall cometh in it.
Come on in.
So, I know that I can point to experiences in my life where I feel like the church, the organization of the church, it's
Yes.
the same as they, right?
Yes.
The church has contributed to people, to the paralysis of people who don't feel included. And what do we say, or how do we disciple someone through that in a space that's supposed to be safe? There should be no more inclusive place, right? We're supposed to all be able to come here and be filled.
Yes.
But so often we come here, wherever your here is, and we're destroyed.
Yes.
And we're creating outliers.
Because we're not in the in. They're not in the in group.
They're not in the in
Right.
group.
They don't speak Christianese, or they don't dress the way that traditional church folks are supposed to dress. They,
Or your sin look bigger than mine.
yeah, or your sin is the same as mine. So instead of dealing with mine, I judge yours to deflect off of mine.
My God.
And that often is from the pulpit to the pew. Anyway.
Insert crickets here.
And so, to your point, a place where God so loved the whole world.
Right.
As my grandmother would say, ERBODY, body. He came for all of us.
Yeah.
Every letter of the alphabet was included when he saved when he came for the whole world.
Right.
Right. And yet we create these silos within the church of inclusion. And I think God's going to hold a lot of people accountable for how they have literally disenfranchised groups of people from the gospel.
Yep.
And more importantly, from love.
From love.
Which covers, my Bible says, the multitude of sins. And I feel like God is in the middle of beginning to rearrange and restructure the body.
Yes.
Not so that everything goes, not so that holiness is thrown out the window,
right,
but so that love is at the forefront and not judgment, not patriarchal, colonized foolishness that oppresses groups of people so that the superior group can feel comfortable in their own skin. I think God is starting to tear all of that down. It's creating some factions.
Yeah.
It's creating division.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to tear something all the way down.
Yes.
So that it can be rebuilt with the proper structure and the proper foundation. And I personally believe God is in the middle of doing that. I think so many people are stepping out of ministry because they're burnt out and they're tired, but I also believe because God didn't intend for them to use them in this season.
Right. Ooh, there's so many podcasts being birthed out of this podcast right now. And I'm not no theologian. I don't claim to know how to exercise the scripture like the people. But wasn't Jesus an outlier?
Absolutely, and
I
without,
just want to
without.
say, like,
He was.
I feel like
Yes, he was.
I feel like he was.
He did. Listen, he was born in scandalous situations.
Scandalous,
right? With this teen mama and the daddy wasn't the daddy. Come on, let's talk about it.
Let's talk about
it. Right? With this carpenter lifestyle, and yet everybody was trying to figure out what good could come out of this city.
Yep.
Right. And we only talk about Joseph and Mary's situation and the angel, and people going, sure, she got impregnated by an angel. I mean, the whole story in and of itself
crazy
brought him forth in a particular way that caused him to live just outside of whatever was perceived to be right by the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Right? In fact, you'll find they were like, well, what kind of man is it? Who is he?
What manner of man is
what
this?
manner of man is this? Yeah. And so, of course, Jesus was an outlier, which is because he says he can identify with everything that we feel.
Right.
He gets it.
He gets it.
There's not one person who's in a space who feels like I'm this or I'm that Jesus can identify with. Right? You just got to give him the opportunity. Right? And that's a whole nother
podcast, because you're a podcaster apparently, and you have other podcasts inside of you. Okay, so what do you say? How do you help? Let's put that was your pastor hat. Let's put on your leadership hat.
Okay.
because you've led in a lot of really big, public spaces.
Yes.
Let's put on your leadership hat / like your parental hat even. What do you speak to leaders who know that they have outliers in their midst, and how can they support them, or parents who are kind of looking at a child struggling, and you're as someone who has felt that way, you can identify with other people who feel that way. So not just speaking to those people, but how do you speak to the people who they're up under? Like, how do you support someone who feels that way?
As a leader,
one,
take the lid off the box, right? Open it up, and in my mind, the way I see it is, they have these new cards where you open them up and butterflies fly out.
Yes, and
right?
I want somebody to buy me that.
So noted. That's kind of how I feel about a good leader, right? Opens up the box and lets what people perceive to be caterpillars, unable to fly and soar, or who feel like caterpillars, right? I'm just crawling and scratching out this here, but to let them blossom and bloom and create a safe environment to where the whole of them is accepted, right? Because if you hide, you can't change what you won't expose, right? And exposure gives you the opportunity.
You can't change what you won't expose.
Yes. So exposure gives you the opportunity to chisel away at the things that don't need to be there.
Yep.
Right?
That's good.
And that's a painful process sometimes, but at the end, what it yields is a fully materialized individual walking in the power and the authority that they were created to walk in.
Right.
At the end of the day. And so part of being a good leader is not only seeing the potential, but creating an environment where the potential can be watered and nurtured and grown. I've worked a lot of jobs. I was a professor at a university for many, many years at Cal State Northridge. So I saw incoming students for 1 year, and then I moved over to graduating seniors in the School of Business, and helping to prepare them with realistic opportunities of what the real world looks like, which is not always in the textbook, right? And so even as leaders, sometimes we have this textbook theology or orthodoxy, right? That we want to give to people. But sometimes the best way is to expose your own experience, your own hurts, your own wounds, your own struggles, your own insecurities, and let them see that in spite of all that, you still persevered and you're still in a place of leadership. So one, I think, is authenticity and transparency. Two, I think, is how you respond. One of the things that I don't know who told me this. I don't know if God gave it to me. I don't know. But from my kids' early ages, I decided I would never overreact. Some things happened in my life in my childhood that I felt like if I told my parents, the way they would react would create so much damage that I didn't tell them. I didn't feel safe for the other people. Felt safe for myself. But I felt like if
this is going to explode,
explode. And because I knew the reaction. So I felt like with my own kids, if I don't overreact, I create an atmosphere where they can tell me anything.
They can tell you anything.
And I'm not going to fly off the handle. I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to scream. I'm not going to go out and beat somebody up, right? Which has created a really wonderful relationship between me and my kids to feel safe to say something to me, right? So one, don't overreact. Or two, don't overreact. Also from a workplace corporate perspective, I worked at Disney for 20 years in Tokyo and Florida, all the theme parks, doing executive development, doing finance, doing all the things. And I always had staff, right? And finding spaces for my staff to express who they are and to share their life.
Right.
Because in the sharing of their life, you get opportunity to speak into it.
Right.
And I'm not talking about moving past barriers where people haven't given you authority to walk in. Right. Because people have boundaries and you don't cross those.
For sure.
But where you create an atmosphere where they feel safe enough to come in and go, I had the most horrible weekend because XYZ happened. Right? And then you get to lead past the financial report for
Right.
Tokyo Disney,
Right.
past, the problems that are happening at corporate with not having enough money for this park opening or whatever. But you get to really invest in the lives, right? From being a professor to working in corporate America to being a pastor to being a parent.
Yeah.
For me, those are the ways that I have learned. And how about I'm still learning? I'm still evolving. Because you heard me just say earlier in the podcast,
Evolving, yes.
I'm still learning how to be the authentic person that I am, with all of my fears, with all of my apprehensions, with all of the things that make me cringe about my own self, and bringing light to those things so that they can be not just expressed, but worked on in therapy, with my therapist, or with pastoral leadership that I have in
Right.
my life.
Right.
I'm still learning how to do that even better than perhaps I have done in the past. Because past success is not an indicator of future success. You got to keep working on it.
You gotta keep
You
working
got to
on
keep getting better.
I don't want to be dramatic,
Don't be dramatic.
but I love drama.
Yeah.
What happens to an outlier if they stop evolving?
Oh my goodness. So not too long ago, I called up my friend John DeCure, and I literally said, I crafted my my resignation letter to Hope's House. I'm done. I'm done. I can't say the word he used, but he said, meet me at Houston's in Pasadena tomorrow, 7:30. I said, nope, I don't want to talk. I'm done. I'm out.
I'm just calling to let you know.
I'm just calling to let you know.
Yeah.
So I don't know who they're going to find to pastor this here church. But I'm done, because I can't take the way people treat you. I can't take the workload. I can't take all of it, and I'm done. And I was taking care of my mom. I was taking care of my father-in-law. We were, in the pandemic. And so my kids were home, doing college at home. The level of isolation, all the stuff, it was way too much. And so I met him at Houston's, because he's that guy. And I sat down and I explained. He's like, so talk to me. So I explained everything as honestly and as transparently as I could. And he said, okay, I heard all of that. He says, so what's feeding in? And I said, what? He said, what's pouring in? I just heard you with the whole deck of cards, all 52 of them, just
out.
And there's no cards sitting in front of you. So everybody's playing. Everybody's getting the benefit of being taken care of. What's pouring in? And I was like, well, who got time for that? And then who's going to do that?
Who's going to do that?
Who's going to do that? And he said, you can't be the sole giver in your life.
In all these spaces.
In all these spaces. And he says, you sound like a person who's dying.
Ooh.
And I was like, that's how I feel. He said, of course you'd want to quit, because everything in you wants to survive, and you want to go find life somewhere, because you feel like in this space there's no life. And so, being who he is, he connected me with a new therapist that dealt with trauma and intimacy issues, which she's amazing, and helped my life.
Put a pin in that.
And he connected me with a marketing PR firm, a coaching team to help me get my life together. Full transparency, they're the ones who said, you got to do a podcast of this. You got it. You're a voice. You are an emerging thought leader. I was like, I'm old. They're like, you're an emerging thought leader. You have great wisdom. You've done a lot of things, from corporate to church, to professor, to all the things, entrepreneur, business owner, speaker. I travel all around the world doing leadership development. They're like, you have stuff to say that is helpful. Do the podcast. So here we are. So he connected me with that group. And what I found is, as an outlier, as somebody who is pushing without watering of your own soul and your own creativity, if you spend it all on everybody else, your creativity dries up. And as soon as your creativity dries up, then you're on a slow path to death. And it may not seem like it on the outside, but everything in you is beginning to shrivel up.
Yeah.
And so then depression comes in, wanting to quit, burnout, all those things begin to set inside of you. And so I think that was the moment that I realized, in talking to him, I'm slowly
Just slowly
dying on the inside.
That's
Not my
heavy.
physicality.
Right. But that's heavy.
It is. It is. And it was weighty.
Yep.
It was weighty. And I didn't realize it was happening because, I care and I'm a giver and I love making sure everybody around me has what they need. But if you're not present, you can't help anybody.
Yeah.
Right? And, full transparency, I don't have a lot of friends. I know a million people, but I don't have a lot of friends. And that's part of that space of feeling like that's that group, that's that group. And some of that's in your own head. It's a narrative that you've been fed.
I was going
because
there
you
next.
feel like you're on the
Feel
outside.
like you're on the outside.
And so you don't engage. Or you don't ask. Or
because
you don't
I
step
hear
in.
somebody asking, then how do I find my people?
Yeah.
And that's a valid question.
It's a very valid question.
If everything around you is saying to you, you're not in, and then I'm saying to me, I'm not in, then the next question in the sequence is, okay, so
how do I get out
right.
of this not in space?
Right, and where does that leave us? Where does that leave you? And how do I not be there?
One, you got to shift the narrative in your head because that's where it starts.
Yep.
As a person thinketh, so are they, right? And so beginning to shift the narrative about how you speak about yourself,
right.
how you perceive yourself. And, for those who are Christians, it's saying what God says about us, right? Because God has been very, very clear about who he created us to be, right? In his image, and said it was good. Fearfully and wonderfully we have been made. And so God is literally pushing us to step into a space of authenticity of who he created us. And you gotta spend time here.
You gotta spend time
changing. You gotta spend time changing. I also think that you have to be willing to take some risks, right? I started joining women's groups, like literally paid whatever, nominal fee it was to be part of a speaker's bureau. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Different conferences, you know what I mean? And showing up. And how about accepting invitations to people that I probably would have normally said, no, I don't want to go to that. And realizing that if I wanted to change what was going on in my life and the isolation and the loneliness that was present, that I had to push and do something different. And that was scary.
Yeah.
And it's still scary. I'm still in the process of that.
Right.
Because let's be honest, there's not a lot of female pastors, lead senior pastors around. It's just not.
Yeah.
So all of my friends were male, right? But I can't go on vacation with my male friends.
You may not.
I can't, right?
Right.
So if you want to go on a trip, you want to go hang out in Jamaica, if all my friends are dudes, well, then that means I'm going by myself. And that doesn't preclude going on vacation with my family and my husband. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about that.
Like your friend group, your circle. Yeah. The people that you feel like get you.
And then, I have a tendency to really connect with A-type personalities. Well, guess what? They're busy.
Right.
Because they're A-type personalities.
Right.
So trying to get schedules together and trying to find time and, no, I'm doing a movie this time, or I'm recording this time, or I'm speaking, or I'm out of town, I'm traveling. Man, for a while, it was, I just
tough.
felt alone and isolated, and my only role is caregiver. That's what I'm relegated to, is to caring for everybody else. And so when John really pushed me in that season, I had to make a decision. You can either stay in this space and feel what you feel, right, and keep looking out on the horizon and watching other people have fun, right, or you could carve out some time. And so I had to make some real changes. They weren't popular with my family. I had to rearrange some things with regards to care for my mom, because I realized that it was just not humanly possible to care for her and her dementia, and how much that required, and how I didn't have the skill set, nor did I have 24 hours a day to tend to it. And so I had to make an unpopular decision of putting her in a place that could care for her, and taking the onslaught of anger that has been distributed as a result of that decision, and knowing that it was still the best decision. It was still
the best decision.
Right? And
that's the part.
I'm dying to do all of it,
That's the part.
Yeah.
Some decisions that are required of us to be in a different place are everything you said. They're unpopular.
Yep.
They're hard. Everyone doesn't understand them. and they cause some sort of reaction in
Yeah.
somebody else.
Yeah.
But when you're in a place where you're deciding, I'm making a decision, like for us by us,
Yeah.
like
Right.
for me, by me,
Yes.
for me and by me, and I have to stand 10 toes down in that decision for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it, in some cases, it then begins to liberate other people around you
Yes.
to reevaluate their own lives and see where they are pushing in spaces they no longer have capacity for. And then in other spaces, it causes people to feel like you've abandoned them, or, you know, I always say, you know, so for some people, you're only as good as your last yes. And as soon as you say no, then they feel some kind of way, right? But was our relationship predicated upon my yes in all things pertaining to you? Or do I have the ability to say no and love
Without
still
consequence.
remains? Yeah.
I feel like the psalmist Beyonce said something about the first time I said no, it's like I never said yes.
That part.
I think that's the lyric from the psalmist.
Yes, that part.
Beyonce. So I'm very interested to know, without giving us all the spoilers, who all gonna be on here? Who all gonna be over there?
Let me see.
What kind of guests?
People you know, people you would recognize, people who have a measure of success, and then some people that you may not know but are successful in their fields. So there's actresses from TV shows you know. There's singers with songs that you know. There's financial people who are managing huge portfolios of finances. There's an athlete or two. There's some spoken word artists and poets. There's people who are doing their thing in their genre who are, in many cases, to be at the top of their game. I know some pretty amazing people. You're one of them. And many of them have agreed, just predicated upon schedule.
Yeah.
And then there's some up and coming and rising people like Coco Jones, right, who's on the rise.
Love her.
You know, young people.
Yeah.
So it's not just the older generation. It's young and everywhere in between. It's male and female. So we're going to get into people's lives. They're willing to share so that they can help somebody. I'm not opposed to asking some tough questions like you've asked me today. And prayerfully, they will just give a nugget or two that will help somebody on their journey live out the best version of themselves. That's my heart.
I love everything about those people who I know and don't know, and I'm excited about that.
I just want to tease you with a little, you know.
I know, and I'm glad you said male and female, because I was also going to ask, is this female driven, or is this really for women?
It started out female driven, to be real honest.
Okay.
And then I realized, Evolving Outlier is everybody. Men just don't talk about it too much because they're men many times. You know what I mean? And so I want to give space. I want to hold space for some of the fellas, to be able to share. Because I'm hoping that not only women listen, but men listen as well. That's my heart's desire.
Yeah, so. And I think there's a space to say, well, and what do you see? Okay, let's just be real about the world.
Yeah,
society. Things right now are really crazy. And I would even say some days scary.
Yes.
And based on the future of what you see happening in our world, how is this conversation going to be relevant?
I think everybody's looking for authenticity. I think everybody's looking to see, am I really different? Am I just different the same? Right?
Yes.
And you only know that when you get the opportunity to hear somebody talk about it. And you go, oh, wait a minute. I feel like that. So I'm not alone in this world.
Right.
I'm not alone in my insecurities. I'm not alone in my fears. I'm not alone in my anxiety. I'm not alone in my depression. I'm not alone in this isolation. And so I really want to give space and hold space for people to be able to hear that they are not alone and that other people are experiencing the same things and they still have an ability to get up. And so can you get up too? Are you willing to get up? Are you willing to press forward? And so, yeah, men and women, let's go.
Everybody.
ERBODY. Everybody.
Everybody. Okay, so how do I sign up for you? How can I get more of you? Where do we follow? What do I subscribe to? What should I be listening for? Tell us.
At the bottom of your screen will be an email
Okay.
of how you can reach me, but you can also follow me on Instagram at Dr. P. Dre, DRPDRE, right? Dr. P. Dre is Dr. Pastor Dre. That's where the P comes from, in case you want to know. The same is true of Twitter.
Okay.
And then on Facebook, Andrea Humphrey is where you can find me. On any given Sunday, you can find me at Hope's House Christian Ministries, but also on my website, Dr. Dre Humphrey, you'll be able to see my speaking calendar and where I'll be next. You'll see podcasts, you'll see clips, you'll see little innuendos and little things that may help you on your journey. And then every Wednesday, I do a little thing called Humphrey Wednesday, a little play on my name, right? Helping you get free over the crazy things in life. So those are all the ways you can find me.
Love that, and I love this for you, and I'm so glad that you said yes. I'm so glad that you pushed. I'm so glad for your close friends who pushed you. I'm so glad for your daughters who
teach me all the time.
To teach you all the
God,
time.
They teach me all the time. They're amazing.
Your family and your husband and everybody, and I'm really happy that this is happening, and I am excited to see who is freed from conversations and who's listening and who is like genuinely changed because you're doing this.
Thank you. It's a year of yes. Yeah, it's a year of yes.
It's a year of yes.
And I can only do this because I have the most amazing husband, by the way, who just takes care of so many different things so that I'm free to do what I do, right?
Ooh, that's what I should have asked you.
What?
What about if your spouse is an evolving outlier?
Oh,
Part
Lord.
two.
Part 2.
I love you.
I love you too. Thank you so much for just hosting and asking me all these hard questions. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Saying that. Love you.
I love you too. Thank you for watching and listening.